Tuesday, August 3rd. I'm Tyler Ward. Along with me at the table here are fellow selectmen Bill Taylor and Bill Kennedy. We have Allie Croyce back taking minutes this evening. And Town Administrator Nicole McStay is here with us. And we have our Town Clerk Lilli in the audience. Tonight on our agenda, we're a little late. Thank you. We had a non-public session that we ran a little long on. But at 5 o'clock, we were going to start a public hearing to consider the acceptance of unanticipated monies pursuant to RSA 31:95B in the amount of $350,000, $350,082.19 in local fiscal recovery funds from the state of New Hampshire under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Shortly after that, we'll appoint a deputy clerk, Sandy Williams. The recommendation from Town Clerk Guyette. Right after that, we'll hear from Lilli Gilligan, our incoming finance director. We're saying goodbye to Leo officially soon. Thank him for his dedication to the town. And welcome, Lilli. And then Beth Marsh will come in, our tax collector for the acceptance of the tax deed. And State Senator Denise Ricciardi is here to update us on things on what's going up in the State House. Get back to some old business. We'll reappoint Deb Caplan, Greg Kriebel, and Elizabeth Reinhardt as alternate members to the Library Board of Trustees. And we'll discuss the proposed Comcast franchise. We have a large agenda this evening. Proposed Comcast franchise agreement discussion. And then we'll review and approve minutes, hopefully from July 6th. And then coming up, we have some new business. That's been a great topic of discussion just around the country. Proposed affordable housing committee, see if we can shake things up there. We would love to hear from anybody that's in the audience. If you do have anything to add or questions, please raise your hand. We'll call on you and just state your name for the record so we can get those in the minutes. All right, first up.
With a question already?
Public hearing. Yes, Kate.
Yeah, Kate Kuhn, could you please add to new business approving Zoe
Yes.
Rosenheitzman as an alternate for
Right.
our recreation committee?
Thank you. That wasn't on our original agenda.
Right.
I completely forgot to add that. So
Thank you.
for reminding me.
Yep.
All right. In the public hearing, we have documentation to go over.
So we have very simply, as discussed at the last meeting, we have been granted $701,000 in local fiscal recovery funds that are coming in two tranches. We received the first tranche of $350,082.19 from the state of New Hampshire through that local fiscal recovery funds under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Previously discussed, the select board needs to put it to a purpose that is allowed under the American Rescue Plan Act. And that act allows you to put those services to the maintenance of infrastructure or pay-go spending for building new infrastructure, including roads, modernization, cybersecurity, including hardware, software protection of critical infrastructure, health services, environmental remediation, school or educational services, and the provision of police, fire, and other public safety services. After some discussion, you would agree that you'd like to put those towards the fire station municipal campus project with my recommendation, which, assuming that you still feel that way, we're prepared to do.
Have any further discussion on that? We did talk about it. Anybody have any questions about that? Alternate suggestions? It's a pretty good use of the funds, right? I mean, considering they were in the heart of everything COVID related, right? All right, I'd make a motion. Oh.
I just
Yes, Sharon.
wanted to say I think that's an excellent use of the funds. That's all. Just
You got Sharon.
my support for that.
All right, thank you.
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the $350,082.19 of local fiscal recovery funds from the state of Hampshire and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021.
I'll second that. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. All right. Next up. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So, Sandy Williams, Deputy Town Clerk, you're here to just meet us, right? And
Get your blessing
right?
on her as my new deputy.
Okay, and you're willing to take this job?
I sure am.
Yeah. So how
Sherry took it.
you? Oh, do you live in Peterborough?
I do live in Peterborough.
Excellent. Nice
Have
to
for
meet you.
38 years.
That's a
Excellent.
requirement to be a deputy.
It is. Just checking. Any questions for Sandy or?
What experience do you have in the past? Have you done any clerk work?
I have not done any clerk work. I've done 30-plus years of customer service. Owned my own business here in town for a long time and worked there for 22 years. I was in the medical field, so I've done a lot of, HIPAA and privacy stuff, and just customer service is really my thing. I owned a car business, so I'm somewhat familiar with DMV. So that's my experience.
A lot of procedures and protocols to follow.
There sure are. I've been watching her closely.
So I'm presuming that you're training her.
I am training her. She will be going to the state for certification. And that's just the beginning because the rest is really all hands-on training through me. It's the only real way you're ever going to learn this job.
So Sandy, you're going to report to Lilli directly?
Yes.
Is that the arrangement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Town clerk directs the deputy town clerk and all their duties, even though they're really an employee of the town. So it's a slightly complicated
Yeah, I know.
relationship.
It creates some issues in the past. Your office is right in with Linda there.
Yes, right beside her.
So when I come by to say hello, I'll see you.
Yes, you will.
And this is going to be part-time or full-time?
Full-time.
Full-time.
Yep.
And your budget is in line to
Mhm.
Yeah, it's included in the budget.
include in the
Yep.
budget?
Yep.
All right, any questions?
I'll make a motion to accept the nomination.
We need to hear from anybody in the audience.
It's not required.
Excellent. Okay.
Second.
All right, all those in favor to welcome Sandy to the team?
Yay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, up next, Beth, hi. Oh, wait.
There's somebody
Lilli,
behind me.
sorry.
Right over me.
Welcome to Peterborough.
Thank you.
So, incoming finance director, right?
Yes,
And you've been kind of shadowing Leo for a little
I started
while.
on Friday.
Friday, right.
So,
Great, excellent. And are we appointing Lilli, or it's just, she's
No.
been hired and that's it?
Yeah, welcome Lilli.
Welcome.
And just give her an opportunity to meet you folks. I know
Great.
obviously Bill knows Lilli pretty well at this point, so.
You're not having, it's nice to meet you.
very nice to meet you.
Welcome, hopefully
Nice to
you'll
meet you.
enjoy your time working here. I know Leo's kind of whipped things into shape nicely for us, and we're looking
I
forward to
understand you come with pretty heavy credentials.
Yeah.
It's great, you know. We're only one town, not 5 districts or whatever it was that you
We
were.
have 7 school districts.
Put your feet up.
We're not going to bore you, are we?
No, absolutely not.
We promise to never bore our finance directors.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome as well. Okay, now Beth.
Okay.
Nice to see you again.
Now I can talk.
Right.
So we have not heard from the property owner at the land on Old Bennington Road that we had sent notice of intent to deed. Today was our deed date. I gave Nicole a copy of the deed for the board. We're just looking to see if the board will accept the deed. If the board will accept it, I will get the deed recorded. After the deed comes back recorded with the board's approval, we will send notice to the former owner of his opportunity to repurchase the property. And then after that 90 days is up, the board can do what it wishes with the property. Currently, there there's about $13,000 that's owed on this parcel. At $13,704.05. It's a 3.95 acre lot on Old Bennington Road.
Empty lot. correct?
Empty lot, right, nothing on it.
And usually in these cases, these unfortunate cases where we are deeding a property, the goal would be to put it on the market, sell it, pay off the
Right.
lien against it, and then the owner then
We'll
gets
get
the-
any excess proceeds. Yep.
And that's after, there's a number of fees that we also
Yeah.
retain
Right.
and statutory interest.
Okay.
In my reading of the town code, I don't know why, but anyway, I did read up the town code when we were talking about deeds, and I noticed that there was a provision in there that you would consult with the Conservation Committee and the Open Space Committees to see if they have any interest in using that land.
You do the consulting. That's something the select board does before making final determination about whether or not to sell the property.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we need to float that.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's actually part of the state RSA too. It requires that you go to the planning board and the conservation commission for their opinions before.
Good.
Okay.
So that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Right, not only is on both, so I can bring those up or remind the chairs of each to discuss that. Okay.
But there are a few steps to go through first before we get there, as Beth laid out, so we'll see where we're at come, late fall, early winter.
Okay. And you said around $13,000 in fact.
Yeah.
What's the assessed value of that property?
It is $65,300.
Yep. Okay. All right, we need a motion to,
Except that you,
Except for the,
So moved.
I'll second.
further discussion? Is this something we would take from the audience? No, not really.
no, not until, it's determined that the town is keeping the property and we'll be deciding what to do with it at a later date through the public hearing process.
Okay, all right. I guess sadly, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Thanks, Beth. Thank you for the work, too, to try and track down the person and get them to.
Thank you. I wish the outcome was different,
It's a tough-
but.
Yeah, it's a really tough.
Not for a lack of trying.
Okay, well, we'll move right through this large agenda. so-
We need to.
And I guess now it's time to welcome the State Senator Richardi. How are
Thank you.
Welcome.
Is it good if I stand right here?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. First of all, I'm Denise Ricciardi, State Senator for District 9. And I want to introduce that I'm so fortunate to work with Majority Leader Jeb Bradley, who's here with us this evening. I wanted to come before you because I wanted to introduce myself to those of you whom I have not met. I wanted to tell you a little bit about my first session. I wanted to tell you about highlights in the budget to make sure that you know I will offer my assistance to you for anything that you need, or if you have a need for me to attend any of your meetings, please reach out. So my first session was challenging, being that we've been in this pandemic. And if that wasn't challenging enough, I was working from home and sometimes Zooming 15 hours at a shot. All the while knowing that I wanted to keep a promise that I made while I was campaigning. And that was to do something about property tax relief. So as a counselor in the town of Bedford, I'm all too familiar with the meals and rooms. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the state put into statute that our towns and municipalities would get 40% of meals and rooms tax for property tax relief. But for 2 decades, they have suspended the funds and they have failed to deliver. So I decided to make it my mission to return these funds to all of you. So I put in legislation, a bill, SB 99. My goal was to restore these rooms and meals. I am very proud to tell you that I accomplished getting 30% and, more importantly, a dedicated fund. So the state can no longer suspend these funds, but they will be put in a dedicated fund that you will be able to receive. So that's quite an accomplishment. What that means for you in Peterborough is in year one, you will have $115,000 extra dollars, an increase of $115,000. And in year two, you can count on an increase of $135,000 for property tax relief. So I think that's a pretty good start to the budget. Some of the other things that are important in this budget,
Can I
yes.
ask, is that on top of the money that we would normally receive?
Yes.
And so what, can you remind me what we normally get, since we haven't been getting for the past few decades, the full amount or the 40%?
Yes, well, it's varied. We've never gotten the full 40%. Sometimes you got 17%, I believe that was the highest, out of the meals and rooms tax. So this is going to be above and beyond what you've got. And this budget is also going to give you $180 million back to cities and towns for property tax relief. And due to my bill, the increase from SB 99 is an additional $50.5 million. In addition, this budget is going, and that's over your last budget. So it's 50.5 over the last budget. In addition, it sends $100 million back to the taxpayers. On education fund, and you can ask questions after too. On education funding, we increased education spending by $102 million over current state law. For current state law, bringing our funding to $2.2 billion. So the previous budget also included $140 million. So over the past two budgets, the legislature has increased your education funding by $242 million. That's almost $250 million of new dollars. What does that mean to you here in Peterborough? Well, this is going to increase your budget for school education over the next 2 years by $320,000. Plus, as I said before, the increase you'll be getting from my bill, SB 99. So that increase to answer your question a little bit better, that increase for you over a 2-year budget will be an additional $250,000. And I don't know about you, but I think that's something to be pretty happy about, right? Who wouldn't want more money in property tax relief?
Probably not as much as Lilli.
So I think that's pretty good. But we did create the relief funding plan, and that's going to provide $35 million in additional funding for our schools in the state who need it the most. We also created education savings accounts to help low-income families provide more educational choices for their children. I mean, for me, children and their education means everything. And it seems that all children should have an equal education for not just people who have more means or more affluent means. I think that this is going to be a really good thing for our state. We have a very strong economy and a growing economy. And that's what enables us to do more good things and provide more services. During the pandemic, our small businesses took a big hit. And our small businesses are the backbone to our economy. So I'm proud to tell you in this budget, we have tax cuts for the BPT and the BET. Also, in this budget, to help seniors, we have phased out the interest and dividend tax. And my father is not with me anymore, but my father always told me, you have to save for a rainy day. And if you make $5, you have to save $2.50. I'm telling you, I'm so proud that this budget has over $158 million for a rainy day fund. We're really fortunate because our state of New Hampshire has one of the lowest poverty rates in the nation. We're also one of the most livable states in the nation. And that's something to be proud of. It's an honor truly to serve you and to be available for you. I will continue to work hard to make sure that we can keep the economy as strong as it is. And I want it to be brief so that I could enable you an opportunity to ask questions if you like.
All right, thank you. That was packed with a lot of information.
And money.
So where do we stand with isn't the Conval system suing the state for inadequate funds over the course of quite a long time now? And I realize this makes a little dent in the shortfall there. Where are we in that process with that lawsuit? Is there still a possibility that the town will get or the school district will get the funds that they are seeking?
I am going to, I don't know a lot about, I don't want to talk about law, legal things, but I'm going to defer to Senator Bradley on that because he's been more up to speed on that one.
Thank you very much, and thanks for letting me be here. You know, before I answer education funding, you in Peterborough have the most beautiful town hall I think I've ever been in. And for those of you who might have been in Wolfboro recently, we revamped our town hall. The great room upstairs is now where we do voting and things like that, but this is spectacular. You should be really proud of this building.
This is modeled on Faneuil Hall in Boston.
Is it really? Yeah, yeah. And I love, anybody that knows me, I'm a huge hiker. I've only climbed Monadnock once because it's so far to get here from where I live in Wolfboro, but I've climbed all 48 in every month. So I'm a big hiker, and I love to see all the conservation pictures on the walls. So, anyway, so education funding. The Conval lawsuit has been remanded back to the Superior Court. It's probably going to take a couple of years for it to work its way through the process. Education funding is just a thorny issue in the state of New Hampshire with no easy answers. People have identified the problems, but the solutions are just very difficult. I was in the legislature when the first statewide property tax was adopted. My district, I have 8 of, I think, 17 towns are donor towns, so it's extremely divisive. Small changes to the input of the funding formula can switch a town from being getting funds or receiving town to becoming a donor town. I think, having looked at, before I got here tonight, some of the numbers for Peterborough or Bedford in Denise's district, small changes to the formula could have you in the same situation that my town of Wolfboro is, or Moultonborough, or some of the other donor towns. And as you know, every community has people that are affluent and people that aren't. And so even though donor towns get categorized as, more affluent, there are plenty of people who could not afford their property taxes. So to me, that's been a problem. The other solution is either an income tax or some version of income sales, capital gains. I think some of the issues that Denise talked about, where we are, nationally rated in terms of the economy, lowest unemployment, lowest poverty, et cetera, is in large measure because of the fact that we don't have an income tax. So that's the push and pull of education funding. I think we'll have to see what the court rules. The Conval proponents asked for an adequacy of about $10,000 per pupil. That was a recommendation of the Education Funding Commission that was authorized by the legislature a year ago. They came out with a recommendation of a very onerous statewide property tax. That hasn't gone anywhere in the legislature this year because of the problems I outlined. It just depends on where you are and what you represent. And so communities like these in southwestern New Hampshire, some could benefit and some could lose. The Lakes region, the Seacoast, some of the mountain communities, they'd all become donor towns again. So I think people like me are saying, let's wait and see what the numbers are. I do believe that the best solution for education funding is a growing economy and putting more money into the adequacy formula. So right now we're at about $4,600 state assistance across the board for students in New Hampshire, which is a combination of adequacy and some of the other add-ons. I think we should try to do better than that. And quite frankly, that'd be my hope that the same kind of revenue streams that allowed Denise's bill, Senate Bill 99, to go to 30% rooms and meals funding, if we're able to continue to generate the same kind of revenues, that's where it should go, education funding. So, you know, that's sort of where the lawsuit stands and where I hope that the state goes, you know, over the next couple of years.
To add to that, I don't believe in the donor towns either, because I live in Bedford, but trust me, no one knows better than I that there are many people there that are not, you know, doing very well. When we had the pandemic and I created Bedford Cares and I turned our home into a food pantry and collected and gave out over 3,000 pounds of food, that's because there are people that needed it. So to echo Senator Bradley, having a strong economy and continuing to grow like we are in a surplus will enable us to have more funding for education. I also want to say that the fight that I put forward to get this money from SB 99, I can assure you I will do the same with education when it's dedicated directly to education. And I think that that's very important to know that.
Okay, so then a follow-up question regarding education. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I may not completely understand the voucher program. Does that hurt our public schools and the funding for our public schools, where we really could get everybody a fair education, or
I would,
what does that look like?
what I care about are all children, and I would never support a bill that was going to hurt our public schools. So when SB 130, that's the bill you're speaking about, first came out, I said, I don't really think I can support this. I sat with some of my school superintendents, Zoomed with school board members, and I asked their thoughts. It's really important to me when I vote for something that I know how it's going to impact everyone and how people feel about it. After I did that, I came forward with an amendment to the education savings account. And that is that you have to be able to qualify for it. It has to be within the federal government's 300% poverty level. So what that means is if you're a family of 4, it's around $78,000. And the reason I like that is because all children should have the same opportunity. And if where you're at isn't working, then you need to be able to have the choice to move. The second thing is transition grants. These transition grants are going to help protect the public school to see how this all plays out. So for the first year of anyone qualifying for the education freedom accounts, the school district will get 100% of funding. Now, if you have children who leave for whatever reason, you don't get that 100% funding. You will be getting that the first year, then 75% the second year, and then 25% the third year. The other most important amendment that I really like is there's a committee that will be formed that's going to oversee any impacts, be it negative or otherwise, to the public school districts. I went to public school. My son graduated from Bedford High. In addition to that, I have tried to sit round table with all the superintendents in my district and put multiple dates out, and finally got a handful who were able to make that date, one of those dates. And I sat a few weeks back and I had lunch with these superintendents. And I listened to the problems that they are having in their school districts, and they're all different. Now that we're honing in on it, I am personally working with each of those superintendents who were able to sit with me and work on those problems. Because I believe the public schools need to be the best that they can possibly be. But a kid is in 4th grade once. I don't want to see anybody fall through the cracks because they can't get what they need. So it's a collaborative effort to do this. Hope that answers your question.
It does, it certainly.
Oh, and it will not raise your property taxes. That's been me, the champion of property tax relief. I would never support something that raises your property taxes. The state commissioner of education and the DeSio Bartlett shows it will be an actual savings for your taxes. It will be a savings for your taxes. And let me even just give you an example. Let's say let's say a family has 4 children. 2 children do well in the public school, and the other 2 are they're not thriving, they can't get what they need. So when they leave, the $4,600 will follow that child to, let's say they go to a charter school. But the remainder of the money that the state has given you for those children remains at that school. That leaves you more funding per pupil.
How is that? I don't understand. You're sending $4,600, which is normal allocation for that student in that public school. It's now, that money is now following that student. How is it that this public school isn't losing that $4,600?
That 46 is going, but you get depends on your district. You could have 16,000 per student that you get in totality, or 20,000 per student. If you're still going to get what was planned for that child to go, less the 4,600. So that leaves more funding per pupil.
Thought we only get 4,600.
I
don't
think-
want to have this conversation.
Yeah.
We'll be here all night.
All right, sorry, I do have, you brought up several issues and things, and we rely as a town on what the state is doing and as citizens. You did mention, that during the pandemic and the people in need, and certainly we had that in Peterborough. We had, several, many people that we realized were in compromised, precarious home situations. We're shortly going to talk about affordable housing and what we could do as a town realistically when we know this is the unsolvable mystery in all our lives. But I personally think that it relates to the minimum wage. Where and when are we going to see action on a livable minimum wage from the state? Something that, that can rise people out of the poverty level.
Well, the way I feel about that is when you have a growing economy and your businesses can afford to pay their employees and to hire more people and expand their businesses. Right now, nobody's getting minimum wage. They're getting way over minimum wage. I mean, there's dishwashers getting $25 an hour. There's people looking, there's people looking for work, but not the people, but the businesses are looking to hire. And so right now you can get quite a substantial salary.
I might become a dishwasher.
I know someone that just told me that I'm having to pay my restaurant. He told me I can't get any help. I'm having to pay my dishwasher that much money.
Okay, so we're seeing that employees are kind of holding the ball here now and are forcing people to pay better wages. Why, since as a country, our history has been to mandate a minimum wage, why doesn't it get raised? Why do we wait till a crisis when people are going homeless and can't afford the taxes on their houses and that sort of thing? Anyway, sorry.
Did you want to elaborate on that?
Sure.
I mean,
First of
because I
all,
feel
to
the
get
same.
back to your housing question, over the last couple of budgets, and this has been my bills, we have put 10 million in the last budget into the Affordable Housing Fund and 35 million into the Affordable Housing Fund this year. So I'd recommend, if you have affordable housing interests in your committee, you can get Ben Frost's contact information at the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority from Denise, or I can give it to you afterwards.
Okay.
But you should interact with them because they will have money to help fund affordable housing projects.
Okay, so meaning, who would get that money? The town gets the money to then
So
allocate?
generally, the way it
Contractor?
works is the towns try to partner with developers. That specialize in affordable housing. So as your committee is getting formed, work with any developers that, do affordable housing, and then they get, through the Affordable Housing Fund, lower capital costs, and so becomes more affordable. Obviously, like in my district, the town of Conway adopted a higher density zoning because there has to be a partnership, if you will, between, state dollars, but then also local interests. I mean, you can't build affordable housing on 5-acre lots.
Right.
So that's something that you folks are in control over. But the point I'm making is there's a lot more resources now for these kind of projects.
And is this something that will be ongoing in perpetuity, or this is just?
So
this
we
budget?
put $10 million a year in the last budget 2 years ago. There was going to be a transfer from the real estate transfer tax of $5 million every year. That's ongoing. This year, because we were running big surpluses, and you have identified one of the bigger problems in the state of New Hampshire of affordable housing for business community, for towns like yours, everywhere across the state. We thought that that was as good a use for surplus dollars as there could be.
Okay, and is there any chance of that increasing, $10 million over an entire state? I mean, it seems like a lot of money, but I think that would stretch rather thin.
Yeah, $10 million for the entire state would be dedicated to, I don't know how many projects, but a lot more than we've done in the past. But $35 million over the next 2 years is going to jumpstart affordable housing all throughout the state.
Senator Bradley has written and amended a lot of these bills, and that's why I wanted him to come, to be able, somebody who actually writes it can really expand upon an answer.
Okay. We'll probably hear from our committee at some point. Anybody else have any other questions? I feel like I'm running too long here, maybe. Sure.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but did you address revenue sharing? Revenue sharing, which was suspended by the state in 2010. I'm wondering if there's any talk about resuming revenue sharing to the communities. Say revenue sharing, so that was, and Senator Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 31A, and I believe that
was
an
suspended, you're right, 10 years ago when we had the last financial crisis and Governor Lynch, suspended it. It's not been reinstituted.
For the
I think what we've
retirement.
done is put $50 million into Denise's formula over the next 2 years. And so, hopefully we're able to, and Denise will crack the whip on the rest of us to add, to try to get back to the 40%.
Oh, yes, I
Promise.
plan on fighting for that. Trust me, I fought very hard, but in the wheels of government, I have to compromise. But the good thing is all that money that you haven't been getting that's been suspended, you were never going to get that. And now that there's a separate amendment, you're going to get that 30%. It's very hard to raid an amendment like that and undo it. And as long as I'm there, I'm not going to let it happen. But I totally intend to go back and fight for the whole 40%. But right now, this is a lot more than you've been getting, that all of us have been getting.
It certainly is an improvement in the meals and rooms, absolutely. And this is a personal question. This is not on behalf of the town, but as you know, there's been a lot of discussion in the press lately about current use. Is there any discussion in the Senate about studying current use and perhaps reconsidering some of the state's tax policies on that? As a, for instance, Peterborough currently has about 59% of the privately owned property in town is in current use, and I know this isn't necessarily popular with everyone sitting in this room, but maybe that's something that needs to be reconsidered, that formula needs to be reconsidered when we look at education funding, affordable housing and whatnot, because if we're able to collect more property taxes on these huge swaths of land, it's entirely possible that, the property taxes on the affordable housing may drop a bit and make it a little bit more affordable.
Well, I believe in,
Oh, I had a question. I just
Well,
wanted
Can
to.
we hear what you?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
I believe in property tax relief, and I believe everybody deserves property tax relief. And that's what I fought for. And I will continue to fight for that, just the same as I will continue to fight for more funds dedicated for education. I will never support property tax increases. I want to see us have a growing economy to make everything successful enough to make things happen.
I understand that. This isn't necessarily asking for an increase in the tax rate. It's really has a lot more to do with equality in taxation and fairness. Where the current use laws, to my understanding, and this isn't my area of expertise, but to my understanding, they're really put in place to help farmers to continue to work their family farms that they've inherited over generations and keep them going. When the state began to rely more heavily on property taxes, it became more onerous for those farmers to continue to pay those. There's also, of course, benefits to conservation. However, a lot of current use is being held by wealthy landowners, wealthy homeowners, who don't necessarily have, a conservation easement that allows public recreation on the property, or are using it to, using their land for family farms. So I just asked, if there's more equality in taxation of property taxes, then it would certainly lower the tax rate. Because, the same amount of money will be raised through more land.
Well, I appreciate your comment on that, and I mean, we look at everything when we are, there's new legislation that can come about. I do believe in local control. I think that the state should not get as involved in your local matters.
I don't think current use is a local.
No.
No, it's a state law, it's state statute, but I'm just saying, in general, there may be things that you can do locally. And I'm also on Conservation Commission, and I'm a big proponent of the environment and conserving land. So we do some things that help in that area to acquire more property. So I'm just saying there's some things you can try to do locally in the meantime.
Sharon, did you want to add something
Well,
to that?
I fully agree with everything Nicole was saying, and she's asking, it is a problem. And right now, it's the wealthiest people that own 10 acres, okay? That can, so they're getting this tremendous tax break. They're still only being charged the same amount of taxes as somebody who has a half-acre lot, okay? And so it's really inequitable. And I'm just saying, can't you, yes, we prize open space, okay, but is there anything that you can change the current use laws, perhaps just give, and maybe it would open up more land for development. Maybe if it could be reduced to 5 acres, okay? You know what I mean? I'm just saying, so then there's more 5-acre open space things all around, but there are also 5 acres open for development and to be taxed for local revenue. That's our only basis.
Senator Bradley, would you have?
Sure. Having gone through a couple of current use debates, I think without exception, current uses help protect open space, protect the environment. I think the issue that you raised is a legit issue, okay? One thing that I've always thought might balance it out a little better is raising the penalty when somebody brings it back in from 10% to something higher than that. My recommendation would be, I think those of us that are in the legislature would probably want to listen to a debate on both sides. I'd work with, if you're a member, which I assume you are, of the Municipal Association, and bring that up. And then, it's probably time for a law that was adopted in the 1970s, which has been very successful, but to reanalyze it. I think that's legit, personally. I'm just speaking for me at this point.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
It's
and I
not
get
town not town policy at all. This is
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah?
Sarah Steinberg, I'm on the planning board, but I'm not speaking as a planning board member, I'm just me. I appreciate what you're saying about maybe there's more things we can do in our own community, but I just think that that's like flat out not true with the way New Hampshire works. And for me, looking at it and seeing situations that my peers are in, I really hope that what you're saying is in earnest. I would love to hear a bigger conversation because I personally see with the housing crisis that we're facing in this state and many other states, I look at current use and it seems pretty elitist and outdated given the situation we're in now. I'm not saying that it's outright that in its historical use because I do value, I've grown up in New Hampshire, I'm from New Hampshire, I value the open spaces. But it is an elitist policy at this point when we're looking at our towns, and I know that you know what I mean. It ends up leaving people behind and it ends up putting people in who are already incredibly advantaged at a huge advantage over other people. And then my one other question would be, why don't we have a minimum wage established in New Hampshire, a state one? And like what you're saying, I get that you met a restaurateur that said that, but that's just like categorically not what my friends who are restaurateurs are experiencing. They can't get a dishwasher because there's nobody to hire. That's just, I think that may be true for some people, but it's not for others. So it's not like a general thing that's happening. People aren't getting $25 for washing dishes. It's just not true. Even if it's true in like a couple instances.
Well, like you said, they need a dishwasher and they can't get one. They don't want to pay these higher amounts. It's just they can't draw anybody in.
Right.
And so that's what ends up happening.
I think what Sarah's speaking to is locally, we have a bit of a vicious cycle that we're stuck in. Our rental vacancy rate is less than 1% right now. It's about 0.6%, which is incredibly low. And so the rentals, essentially, they can charge more or less whatever they want to for a rental unit right now. And the rental units are very few and far between. There are more here in Peterborough than there are in surrounding communities, but still Peterborough is a very small community, and so there are very few rentals. And they are very expensive. So we're in a situation where even though Peterborough relies heavily on a service community and a healthcare community that maybe don't make as much, the wages aren't as high as would allow for a single family home, they nonetheless are not enough to support some of the rents, which I can speak from my experience as a human services director here in town. There are many people who are paying more in rent for a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment than I pay for my mortgage every month. So that is a real issue here in this community. Part of it could be helped, maybe not solved by an increase in the minimum wage. But it's a lot of issues that are coming together all at once that have really created a situation that we're in here in the Monadnock region. And I think it is going to require a lot of assistance from the state, from the legislature to start to work our way out of this. But it's going to be a multi-year process without a doubt.
And if I could just tag on to what Nicole's saying, I really appreciated what you said, Senator Bradley, about density being a possibility. And I understand we don't want to go, shoot over and go too dense. But I'd love to see the state Senate and the House take on some responsibility at a state level. I appreciate what you're saying about local. I really do. You can't see I'm smiling. I am.
Your eyes are smiling.
It's just not, we can't do much at a local level. And I know, like Bill, your stepmother has worked really hard to have affordable housing here and to do some of the things you're talking about. But I would like to see at a state level, and I don't think it really matters who spearheads it, I would like to see you have more conversation around what you can do at a state level to build better zoning tools, because I feel like we're trapped in a cycle in our community where we don't even have the tools. It's great that this affordable housing committee is starting up, but we don't have tools in some cases because our zoning, we need better guidance from the state. We need better material. We need better engagement. We need better policy. So I really appreciated what you say, and I hope maybe you could develop some state regulation that helps communities develop that kind of housing. And I know density is really hot in a state like this, where we're rural and we can treasure our open spaces and simultaneously try to really build better communities.
Can I ask
Please.
the question? I remember it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the battle that we had over accessory dwelling units. Do you remember that as a planning board member? And I was one of the ones that voted to authorize them within the certain parameters, but we took so much grief from planning board members that didn't want the state telling you had to allow them.
I want you to tell me we have to allow it.
Yeah, well, there you go, okay.
Then
Well,
if
you
we
know what,
bring
this
this
is
up,
the-
you have to come and you have to speak about your feelings.
I do.
Again, I would say Denise and I and our colleagues in the Senate and the House, we really do pay a lot of attention to the municipal association. And we also, I mean, this is why Denise comes here. She asked me to come here. Senator Morse is going with other people. He's the Senate president. Just so that we can hear some of these questions. I think it's a great discussion about affordable housing because there is no bigger issue, I think, that's holding our economy back and just in terms of the right thing to do than affordable housing. So it does need money. It needs, local communities to step up in whatever way, you can. And then, I think it's a valid discussion to look at least the current use penalty to see if, that's a way of maybe de-incentivizing, some of the land that's in current use. What did you say, 59% of Peterborough?
59% of Peterborough.
And we're lower than a lot of those surrounding
Limeboro,
towns,
which
yeah.
I think is in your district.
That is my
as well.
district, I was just there.
It's 80% in current use.
So
New Hampshire Bulletin just did a big story about it.
So-
You can just get all the towns.
one of the reasons wasn't, just to come and talk to you about the highlights of the budget, but I can't help you fix things if I don't know what they are. And so that's one of the reasons we're here, and the feedback is important, because I didn't want to do this job for any other reason than to serve you and help you get where you need to be. But I have an open door policy. People have my cell phone. You can write to me your thoughts about legislation, then I can run it up the flagpole, and we can have conversations. I am very much in touch with the New Hampshire Municipal Association, not just as a counselor, but they were very happy that I wanted to push the meals and rooms. And I'll be very frank with you, most people told me I couldn't do it. I mean, I even got a few little laughs. But the worst thing you can do is tell me, no, you can't do it. That makes me fight harder. So we will take your thoughts back and we will try and do something to get a conversation going.
One last thing, and I'll stop talking about this, but.
I can stay,
Our state, no, I really will stop. Our state rep, we have Peter Leishman and Ivy Van, she put forward a bill, I believe, and I might be misquoting. It's 341, good, because I was gonna say something else. And it was killed in committee in along party lines in a way. And the governor was actually really interested in this bill, and I was really sad to see it get killed. It was talking about fourplexes and multifamily housing, and I really hope that you could both take a peek at it and see, because the governor was very excited about it, and I know Rep. Van was kind of devastated because she thought it could be a bill where we could really see some bipartisan collaboration around housing and affordability and opening up, like what I'm talking about, some of that idea of policy that comes to communities like ours that are trying, like what Sharon's doing with her, things like that, where there's tools for us to use. So it's 341.
I'm familiar with it because I was I went on it was when we were still all Zooming,
Yeah.
and it was a meeting, and she was on there too. The mayor, Keene, I believe, was there. And so I was talking about fighting for SB 99. And even then, people weren't like, that'll never happen. And she spoke about her bill that day.
Yeah, so
So
I
I
hope
do-
maybe you could follow up with her, Denise, and maybe you
I will
too,
do
Senator
that,
Bradley,
yeah.
and just see if there's maybe an opportunity for it to come back up at a later time with a team approach.
I'll get a copy of the bill so I can read it in depth versus what she said when we had that Zoom meeting, and then I will reach out to her, have a discussion about it.
Thank you so much.
I
Of
think it was
course.
killed in the house, I'm looking at it.
Yeah,
right
no, it
now.
wasn't the house, it
So
wasn't,
we
sorry.
never got to it.
No, no, I know.
Yeah, it didn't come before us.
No, no,
but
I know,
yeah.
I know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, thankfully,
But on the
because
follow-up with you guys.
Yeah,
for
but no,
this.
we never saw it, and I only knew of it because of our Zoom meeting we had.
Okay.
But it might be a good opportunity, since this isn't a fiscal year for you folks.
That's right.
Be a good opportunity to maybe bring it back in the Senate side.
Right, it could be a
Try to get
Senate
some traction.
Yeah.
Okay, also in support of what Sarah and Kate mentioned, we are, I happen to be one of the supporters. I know you're getting a lot of flack for the new HAB committee, the HAB.
Oh.
Aren't you? Aren't you hearing a lot of,
Oh, yes.
especially your Bedford residents group?
I know.
I'm just saying.
I hear every day.
Okay, I just wanted to say, I am very much in support of that. I work in a lot of towns, okay? And I'm just saying
Tell us
that.
what that is for the people, the 6 people watching that might not
On
know what that-
Ustream.
Oh, okay, the HAB committee, Housing
Appeals Board.
Appeals Board. So, many people, you had mentioned, many people are upset. They don't want the state interfering with the town's
Because
decisions.
they want to keep their local control.
They want
out.
to keep their local
And
control.
in the case that you brought up, the Bedford BRA,
Yeah.
they just don't want that high density there, and they fight that every turn, or any changes or
Yeah,
rules.
But there is some oversight. I'm just saying, I like having a 3-member committee who has legal backgrounds and land use law knowledge, and law clerks, and they've been vetted by the Supreme Court for their positions to begin with. I like people who are knowledgeable, overseeing zoning and planning decisions more so. I mean, how many zoning board and planning board members have been vetted by the Supreme Court, really? I mean, so I'm just saying, I'm just trying to agree with, and we are in disagreement. I mean, we've been enemies for years, okay? But well, not enemies, I never felt that way. But I'm just saying, we
don't always
are both,
agree.
we don't always agree, but we do agree that we'd like to see more state guidance and oversight. How's that? Okay.
And we don't always have to agree, but you have to have a conversation.
Right,
If you have
yeah.
a conversation, you can sometimes change your mind a little in this way and that way, and you come up with a much greater solution. And more importantly, if you strongly disagree, it's important to know why someone feels the way they feel.
Yep.
Yep.
So I'm gonna suggest you add that to the next time you go speak to, that you just got 2 people on opposite sides of a
We're not
debate.
opposite.
We're not opposite, we agree on a
You
lot of
characterized it really
I was
Oh
being
my
facetious.
God. Same
So-
goals, just
Same goals.
different ways to get
Different
there.
ways of it getting there,
Yeah.
that's all it is.
So, okay, and sorry, I'm gonna keep going since you're here and we may not see you for a while. So,
I'll come back if you invite me.
Okay. One more issue we're seeing are, we're a rural town. Not everybody has internet, and every town in rural communities are being forced to either bond for expansion of their internet access, and Peterborough just passed something at town meeting to put up some money that will be then be on the backs of the users. But what's the fight like to get? How close are we to internet becoming a utility, for crying out loud, and getting it so that the companies pay for their own expansion,
Oh,
because
this
in
is a-
essence that eventually makes them.
I have been working with my town of Hancock is also one of my towns, and a lot of them trying to get this broadband rurally. And then in the case of Bedford, I'm on the telecommunications committee, and because we don't qualify for the rural, we are trying diligently to have something change where we can put in our own and do our own fiber optics and do our own, there's so many rules that are prohibiting this or that. But Senator Bradley, it was his bill for the broadband, so I am going to let him elaborate for you since he wrote it.
So, the good news is you folks just accepted $350,000, I think, for ARA money. the state of New Hampshire is getting $122 million of our money specifically earmarked for broadband. My bill creates a matching grant program, similar to state aid water grants, but it's at 50-50. And so 50% will be state and federal funds, so we'll use the federal funds at least for the foreseeable future. You would have the opportunity as a town to work with either a communication district or a bond that you would take out individually, and your provider for the other 50% to access those funds. So where my bill stands, the governor signed it, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Taylor Caswell at the Bureau of Economic Affairs is in the process of hiring people to administer the state grant. They'll have to write rules. So what I would suggest, I mean, you've obviously earmarked the $1 for a fire station, which is a good purpose. But I don't know who your cable provider is or if it's CCI and DSL, but you should be working with them right now to map the areas of this town that need broadband, which you may have already done.
We've already done that.
If you've already done that, you're a step ahead of the game. So then, as soon as the rules are published, you'll want to work with Denise, and I'm helping her in Hancock, and I'll do the same thing, you know, to help make sure that you're in the door at the, you know, Bureau of Economic Affairs to get in line for the funding. And there'll
We
be
just need
money.
$262,500, like,
Yeah.
How much?
in the next couple of weeks. Just $262,000.
Yeah, we're actually, we're a very, very light lift here in Peterborough, but for the other towns in our district, our school district, SAU1, it's far more significant, like you're saying, Hancock, Francistown.
That's where I've been working. I was
So
on the
have you
phone
formed
today.
a communication district with those towns?
Each of those towns was on different trajectories. They jumped into the broadband at different times individually, so there really wasn't, you know, the opportunity unfortunately had more or less sailed by the time the ability to do that had already.
It sounds like you'll be, hopefully my matching grant initiative will be up and running middle of the fall under, I'm sure you're familiar with the emergency rulemaking provision, so they can go out with 6 months of rules. And hopefully money can fly out the door sometime in the next 3 or 4 months. That's my
Can you
hope.
forward me, you know, what you've mapped out and everything so that I can?
We
work
already
on-
voted on it.
Sure.
We already voted on it, we already have the quote.
Yeah, we're actually past that point. We were at the point with CCI when we learned about, you know, the money coming down in ARPA. Was speaking with CCI, we were just hammering out the last details of our agreement, and they said, hey, would you mind putting it on hold, and we'll see, you know, what the state is gonna have to help out, because that's what we're doing in other towns. And we're like, yeah, sure, you know, it makes perfect sense, you know, to put it on hold for a little bit, see how the rulemaking went, see how it worked in other communities, because their hope was, you know, potentially, if it is possible to create a district and to leverage it all together, that's what we would go ahead and do. Be easier for other towns, you know, to be a bigger unit, as it were. But we'll see how the rules come out, you know, and that's when we're gonna make a reassessment. So again, you know, pretty much the same as they had described later this fall, early winter, sounds like when we're gonna have it all worked out.
Good.
Okay, one last issue that is dear to me, to energy and renewable energy specifically. We're fortunate enough in Peterborough to have had the foresight to put all of our municipal buildings and infrastructure on renewable energy. We just recently at town meeting, citizens voted to create an entity that would gear us towards fully renewable energy for the entire community, specifically with a potential of power
Community
purchasing.
power.
Right, community power.
Well, we committed
Right.
to a goal of 100%
Goal of 100%.
renewable energy that we
Right.
use.
Even with residents. So my question, I think, gears toward, where's my question going? What about localized or easing regulations for localized power production And where are we with PUC and net metering? Sorry, that it was out there.
We just, we had some good energy bills that all passed in the Senate this time, and we've made progress locally on some of this, and all of the energy bills are Senator Bradley's, all of them.
I hate to be taking over
I know, but
this
he
meeting,
wrote
but
them,
that's
so
why Denise invited me.
Yeah.
So I had hoped that the governor was going to sign Kevin Avard's net metering bill today, but they canceled it. I don't think there's any problems. He has vetoed net metering bills in the past, but what he's agreed to is a bill that would allow Peterborough or any other municipality in the state to net meter up to 5 megawatts. That's a pretty significant amount of energy, whether it's solar or you could do a wind farm potentially. I don't know what your river situation might be in dams and hydro, but you could net meter up to 5 megawatts, which would be a pretty significant amount of power for a town this size.
Our solar array is 1.1 megawatts,
Right.
so that would certainly fit under that.
And it's my hope that eventually we will be able to expand the net metering, what he's supposed to sign, to any private developer too. But we haven't gotten that far yet. So the reason for the 5 megawatt cap is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, anything above 5 megawatts is suddenly regulated by FERC. And so across the country, these net metering projects have tapped out at 4.99 megawatts.
And so as a state, are we putting pressure on the United States?
Oh.
The
Feds
next,
level?
for, you know.
Well, I think that we are going to see in this country more and more renewable energy. I mean, look, battery technology is in the near future, I think, when it's affordable. You know, I have a solar system on my house. I can't wait to have batteries to be able to store it so I can use it. I think that's the next technological breakthrough, and then you're going to see a new paradigm in terms of power.
Is the 5.5 megawatts the cap on the town or per installation, per customer?
So it would be 5 megawatts for the town of Peterborough, for a town of Peterborough project. Okay,
So-
right now you're capped at 1 megawatt, which,
And I believe, so you're saying this has to be a municipally owned
yes,
utility?
right,
That's
but you
where we're
could
gonna
partner
get-
with a developer to build it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we don't actually own the array. We own the land under it. We have a power purchasing agreement for the electricity off of it, but we don't actually own the array itself. It's owned by what was Borrego. I forget what the Water Street LLC or whatever they call themselves. And it's a subsidiary.
And so residential homeowners wouldn't be allowed, or businesses wouldn't be allowed to?
Well, anything, 1 megawatt is way more than any homeowner would ever want to produce.
But
But
it's up
for
to-
instance, a larger business that wanted to do an installation, we would have to, again, pass a bill that allowed for private development up to 5 megawatts. I think Governor Sununu vetoed 3 net metering bills. 2 of them were mine, so, you know, and he's one of my best friends, but I wasn't able to convince him to go the whole boat. But he did agree to the municipal portion of it, and I think that was, he saw it as a way that taxpayers could be helped in town, because you can lower, you know, the cost that you have of doing business, and any other folks that would net meter as part of the town of Peterborough net metering initiative. So that hopefully will be signed shortly.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions?
You can always reach out.
Sure. Face to face.
Well, I like it better too. That's why I'm making my trek around to everyone.
All right, well, I think I'll take the opportunity to thank you for coming in. Thank you for bringing Senator Bradley. And
I knew to talk about the budget specifically, but I figured you were going to have other areas that he has actually written the bills, and I wanted you to feel comfortable in getting all of your answers satisfied tonight.
thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's good to see all of you.
If you want to stick around and hear what we talk about for the affordable
Do you know how far he has to drive to a home?
Yeah, I know exactly where it is. I just drove through last weekend.
I gave some to her. Should I give them?
I texted him across the
That's odd.
Oh, okay, I
I
gave
was
them
nervous.
to her.
Too late. Question?
I do have a question.
Oh, before they leave.
One more.
His number now or no?
My name's
have
Diana
Representative
from
Van.
Summer Street.
Senator Ricciardi, we have one more.
One more thing.
constituent.
I was in Keene, I'm really sorry. I've been stepping on rakes all day today.
This is the Ivy van that we were talking.
I recognized her from there. Remember when we were on that
Yes,
Zoom
I do
together?
vividly remember when we were on that call together. What I rushed down here to talk about was backing up to the whole question of state oversight and the fact that we're a Dillon's rule state, and what does that mean vis-a-vis land use regulation in the state of New Hampshire. I just wanted to bring to your attention the fact that the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority has partnered with the Congress for the New Urbanism to come up with a set of recommendations for regulatory changes in the state of New Hampshire. I'm not sure where it is in the pipeline right now, but I want you to be aware that that work is coming, and that that's work I think that as members of the elected body we should support. I certainly am going to introduce bills that come out of that work.
Well, it would be nice if we could work together, since we're both representing, Peterborough. I think that would be a really.
And I am going to bring back HB 349, which was killed by my
We-
committee. I know. I was listening on the radio as I was coming. I am going to refile that bill.
Streaming.
We're
on the radio now? Really, this fame knows no better.
Next thing you know, you'll be Garrison Keeler. I am going to refile. Yes, thank you. I'm going to refile 349. I don't know what the number will be, but as soon as the filing period opens it, I'm going to refile it, so.
Exactly the way you did it, or looking at some of the objections they had to try to get more support, or?
I fixed all the things that people complained about already.
Okay.
And it didn't do any good. So I'm going to try again, and I hope that I will get more support. I mean, for one thing, that is a property rights issue, as well as above and beyond everything else that it does.
Talk about local control.
Yeah.
That's right.
So,
Maybe as state legislators, since there's so many of them in the room, we can all agree to take the word fight out of all the conversations and make that work together. Fight always turns me off every time I hear that on TV and
You really?
on people. It's like, why do they say fight? That's not what you're there to do. You're not there to fight. You're there to work together to get something done. So that's the only question or statement I have
Well,
for any of it.
he'll tell you, if I didn't fight for the SB 99, we wouldn't have got it, trust me.
Maybe you worked with people.
Yeah.
I mean, probably didn't actually fight.
No, not that, no, I would never do that.
Right.
All right, thanks. Thanks for making it.
Yeah, thank you so
I was
much.
at the lights, and I'm like,
Thank
oh my
you.
God,
Thank
I didn't think I was gonna
Was it
do somebody so famous,
WMDK?
didn't
Is it still on the air?
All right, up next. Do we have a motion to,
Thanks.
come back anytime?
Did you see me upstairs?
If it's a Senate.
Oh, I've already got your info. Okay, just so that you don't want to reach out to us about any.
Next time
While we have a slight lull here,
Or
I
you know back in the area,
have a
let me
motion
know.
of commendation.
Then I have to look
All
for
right,
it.
have a good rest of the week.
Excellent, that would be really great. Let me walk out.
Nice to meet you folks. Thank you.
Yeah.
In our recent rainstorms, deluge, I'd like to commendate our Department of Public Works for a great job done. Seth McLean and his crew, cleaned things up pretty quickly, and I think made a big difference in the town. So
I can testify to that.
Yeah, I think it's all in favor on that one.
Absolutely, good. Okay.
All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and make a motion to reappoint Debra Caplan, Gregory Kriebel, and Elizabeth Reinhardt as alternate members of the Library Board of Trustees.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye.
And you have the chair of the Peterborough Recreation Committee here to attest to the value of having Zoe on the committee.
Indeed, we have, as a committee, we voted to ask you to appoint her to be an alternate, or approve her to be an alternate on the PRC.
And I'll make that motion to approve Zoe Roden Heisman.
I would strongly second that. I met Zoe when she was campaigning and got a lot of good ideas.
Yeah, good energy. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Great, another opportunity to add another great volunteer.
Yeah.
Welcome, Zoe.
Yeah.
That's how the town runs. Volunteers
to go see
and
Linda tomorrow.
Dedicated staff around the clock. Next up.
See you at that meeting tomorrow, Kate.
Yep,
First,
so I want her signed in before.
Yeah, let her know if she's good.
Well, we have to do the appointment form and have you sign it first, so we have one done yet. But she can certainly sit in on the meeting. No reason she can't.
No, I know she can sit in.
She's
if
an
we
alternate
need a vote.
anyway, so.
Yeah. Yep, okay.
All right. Speaking of cable TV, proposed Comcast franchise agreement.
So thrilling reading, right?
It was
I
interesting.
read it.
Yeah, so the red line version is was presented to you, so you could see substantial changes that have been made to the franchise agreement, which we have actually been working on for 3 years now. We've gone back and forth quite a bit. I think that the changes that we've nailed down between myself and Kate Miller, who's the attorney in DPC who works on this stuff, and Brian Christensen on the Comcast side are very beneficial to the community, those who are within Comcast service area. They don't cover everything, unfortunately. There was a change to the federal law, which does require us to consider the benefit that we get from the cable broadcast, which we're sitting in the room, as part of their compensation to us under the franchise agreement. But all in all, there were some really nice, pleasant changes that we were able to work out.
So the facilities that they provide to us in terms of the cable
So what they really,
system,
yeah.
they're going to value that at a certain value, and then that's going to come out of our
Yes.
fees, franchise fee?
That is correct.
What is our current franchise fee?
Current franchise fee is 1.5% of all basic cable packages, so that basic level of cable television. Keep in mind, this is just on the television portion of your Comcast bill,
Right.
nothing whatsoever to do with internet or telephone.
Right. We have the ability to raise that
Yes, in increments
in increments of up to 2.5%.
in a given year, up to 5% as a maximum.
Have we considered that as a select board at some point? in
Not
the past?
recently.
Is there any reason why we would not consider raising that fee?
It gets passed on to the residents who pay the bill. That's really the downside to it, is that it is an added charge on those people who have Comcast television.
And if you're still watching Comcast television, you kind of need it, right?
Presumably, that's what you're accustomed to at any rate, so.
Well, that's how at least those 6 people are watching us on Channel
That is true.
2.
Although fortunately, because there's no limits on what the town can use the franchise fee for, we put that money towards the broadcast over streaming services. We pay for some of Tim's salary so that he can manage the meetings when we're running them. So it's really, they pay for the servers that we store the video on and whatnot.
That reminds me, I forgot to mention that Tim Bradley was behind the scenes running all this voodoo while we're doing this, getting us on the radio.
What's the
Thank you,
estimate
Tim.
of revenues that we actually get from that franchise fee?
About $27,000 a year, give or take,
Okay.
currently.
And that'll be diminished next time because of the,
Will be somewhat diminished.
do we know what that value is?
Off the top of my head, I don't. I'm not sure that we actually negotiated the exact amount. I think there may be a fixed, There may be a fixed rate, but I'll ask Kate about that, if she didn't include that note in her correspondence with me already.
Right, and there's also the additional 20 to 25,000 to upgrade the equipment to HD for
Yes.
basic cable, which is
We
going to
did
be
know.
put onto.
We did know that
users
was
as well.
coming, yeah, we
Right.
did know that was coming, that was a charge that was coming. When we updated all this equipment a couple of years ago now, we did it preparing for the HD conversion, but we still have to pay for that final piece of the conversion, which is converting our stream to being HD.
But so the people at home that have basic cable and are watching,
Yeah.
will they get a new box from Comcast that's HD, or it's just all
They've
going to
already
happen
got it.
through? Oh, they did?
Oh, yeah.
When did we get that? Oh, long years
A
ago.
while ago, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
That
just
all-
that.
We're lagging here. It's just, yeah. We've focused so much on trying to get the streaming out and making sure that, and fortunately, we did it at a time right before we finished complete the upgrades, not too long before COVID happened. So we were able to continue, as you know, streaming out all the meetings. We're able to stream out, you know, the planning board meetings, as you know, the zoning board meetings, as you know, so that people are still able to participate in those statutory meetings without necessarily having to come to the townhouse to be in a room if they have a compromised immune system or for whatever reason feel uncomfortable being in a private room, which particularly this room, which is so poorly ventilated to begin with.
Now, I noticed that they have drop boxes in all of the municipal facilities as well as our schools.
It is in there, we do not take advantage of it, because they're really the school, I don't know if they take advantage of it or not. I suspect they do not, because really it's the most basic of basic
TV.
modems that you could possibly get, so we just don't. The police department and the townhouse are the only two facilities that have cable television services to them. Ours is pretty stripped down. The police department has a bit more because they need to have the ability to play children's programming in their waiting room from time to time. So they want to have access to Disney and Nickelodeon, that sort of thing.
I suspected as much.
Yeah, but no, the library does not utilize it anymore. We tried to make it work. We really just couldn't. And as you know, being involved in the library building project, they're really pushing a very high-end product for their users now. So it's simply not something that would be covered for free.
And finally, the annual report, Exhibit C.
Yes,
Have they ever filed an annual report with us?
not unless we've asked them to.
I see. So
yes.
you should
We
probably-
request it, yeah.
Oh, have we requested?
I think Kate did, so I believe that she'll be able to produce that for us.
I'd like to see that
Yep.
at some point.
So long and short of it, for all those people that are still watching this meeting, what is the consequence of this new contract?
So we've addressed most of the downsides to the contract, the additional costs that are going to be taken out of the franchise fee. There is some benefit, though, and I don't have it memorized, I should have written it down, but I was focused on other things this week. There was an extension to what they considered a standard hookup, which I think may have gotten extended up to 1,000 feet, but I will need to double check that. But their standard installation is much larger now than it used to be.
It's double the.
It's
150 to 300.
to 300, okay, so that's what it was. And then they're non-standard, and there's a few different changes.
Yeah,
that
instead
went
of
in.
40 homes per mile,
Yeah.
30 homes per
Drop
mile.
down. So this is generally for new construction. It would be hard to press them for existing builds. But if there's a new subdivision put in, those new rules will apply. Even if there's a new single-family home with a longer driveway, that 300-foot standard installation would apply to that. So that is a benefit to residents. It's not significant, but it's definitely an improvement.
And again, this is only cable TV, it's not the internet that goes with it, but you have to buy the cable TV to get internet.
It comes in.
and
Comes on the
it's a
same
package. It's a
pipe,
package.
so,
That's
yeah.
the only thing.
Yeah, it comes on the same pipe. So the franchise agreement does only cover the provision of television services, not internet services, which is why you don't really see changes to the cost of internet that Comcast is charging its customers, only the television. But at the same time, it's coming over the exact same wire. So if the TV is being provided to a given home, then so is the access to the internet. through Comcast. But of course, you're also working with Consolidated Communications to expand their fiber to the home across town. So, you know, there's
It'll be a
another,
different wire.
a different wire.
Be a fiber instead of a wire.
And I think in 10 years, we won't even have TVs.
Good God.
I don't know, I really like watching movies on a big screen.
Well, you'd be streaming it though, you'd be
Right.
streaming it over your internet, instead of
Absolutely.
watching it as a television
Watch
program.
right on your glasses.
Okay.
All right, so I'd make a motion that we accept this.
Move it to public
Move
hearing.
it to public, that's what I
Thank
meant.
That's right. I second that motion.
All right, excellent, all those in favor. Do we need to hear from anybody in the audience regarding moving to public hearing, because we want to talk about this
I
again?
feel like you could do it at the public hearing.
Excellent. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. Thank you, Nicole, thanks for working with the town attorney office. Did anybody read the minutes from July 6th? It was so long ago.
I was in the middle of reading it when Ally sent another email saying that she'd already corrected the mistakes that I was letting her find.
There was,
Yes, it did.
there was one thing in those minutes that I noticed. I asked about GD TIF funds being able to allocate it without,
Yep.
and I don't remember, I think it's around $5,000, or maybe not, I don't know. Did you look into it?
So it's actually, there's no dollar limit. It's so long as the purpose is within the plan
Oh,
of the
okay.
district. So if you want to spend, you could spend any amount, as long as, you know, the fund has the cash available to it, so long as it is to the plan, at any point during the year. If it is not something that is within the plan, for instance, the porta potties behind the toadstool, those are not actually in the downtown TIF plan, so that goes to the budget process and has to be approved by the voters. So as long as it's within the plan, you can spend at any time, with, just so long as it goes to the advisory committee, then the EDA, then the select boards, and final approval.
I think it was related to the EV charging stations, maintenance thereof, but that's like
But that
4
was
years,
voted
5
on.
years out.
Yeah, but that was voted on at town meeting, so that's all set.
Right, but there was a shortfall in funding, I think.
Yeah, and
Potential shortfall in funding.
Potential shortfall,
Right.
depending on how
And we
many
won't see
people
that
use
for
them.
3 or 4 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Do we voted? Oh, so we still haven't voted on these minutes. So is that a
Accept the
motion
minutes, a motion to accept.
as amended?
Yes, in a second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Great, thanks for that. And then, Nicole, I don't see on the agenda the HKT Architects
That's correct.
proposal.
Yep, so we just finalized that on Friday, and the agenda was already closed, so I just wanted to make sure I squeeze that in. We had discussed it at the previous meeting. We, of course, went through a public bidding process, selected HKT architects to oversee the fire station municipal campus project. You did already at your last meeting issue a notice to proceed to them while we are finalizing these last little bits. We got it finalized, including a few corrections, most important of which I feel was moving Peterborough back into the state of Hampshire as opposed to Massachusetts. And making sure that we knew exactly, you know, who was working on which of either HKT or their subcontractors were working on which component of the project. So we nailed all that down, ironed out all the little bits and pieces. You saw the proposal, the agreement. Everyone's ready to recommend it, and if you're good with it, then authorize either myself or Chief Walker to sign it on your behalf. And we get that going.
I have a question. I see in here at this time the project will not pursue any LEED certification or net zero goals through the decision on, although the decision on that may change.
Correct.
I assume that because those are potentially rather expensive endeavors to get involved with, but being the town, it's very conscious of the environment here.
Yeah.
Clearly, our constituents are lean that way. How far can we push them so we don't see like fiberglass bat insulation in this building? And
I think that is all stuff that will be discussed, that you can absolutely discuss during their public meetings. We have one coming up at the end of this month. August 22nd is the first big public kickoff. Love to see everyone here attend that. I think that's one of the things to discuss. The reason why we're not requiring the LEED certification or net zero goals is because of the expense. You're absolutely right. HKT has actually designed a fire station to meet those goals, and it's extraordinarily expensive. And so they are perfectly capable of doing so. I don't know that we are perfectly capable of financially supporting such a thing, though. But you can certainly talk to Janet and Bill about that if you're interested in more information. But yes, they know that it is a priority of ours. Bill, we discussed that, as you recall, pretty in depth during their interview process, and they fully support it, finding ways to make that work as best as possible. But keep in mind that they're big doors. When they open, it all goes out, you know, and when they open again, you know, the outside comes back in. So.
We did have that discussion as part of the task force.
As well, yeah.
It was pretty well agreed that it would be way too expensive and it would delay the project in certain ways. So.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of the cost associated with LEED has to do with the inspections that have to happen along the way. It's wildly expensive to have those scheduled and signed off on by somebody who is certified to sign off on them. You can get a great type building without LEED certification.
And certainly we see in the library, carry on without.
You certainly still have it to the same standards without the
Absolutely.
certification.
Right,
It costs
and
a bit money.
that's my point, is that the certification is,
Exactly right.
in the words of the Twitterverse, it is, what is it we call that? It's not social posturing, virtue signaling. Virtue signaling. A LEED certification is a big piece of virtue signaling, and you don't need to pay for it, just do the virtue.
I think one of the things, you know, many of the things that we had talked about is doing more on the site for green power generation. So we talked quite a bit about solar panels, we talked quite a bit about wind turbines, you know, any number of things that we can do up there to offset the energy that is being used. Of course, we've got a lot of experience with wood pellet boilers. And we're not just looking at the fire station, we're looking at the entire campus. How can we make improvements to the whole campus, which is going to include the community center, it's going to improve the highway garage, it's going to include the future police station, as well as, you know, the fire and rescue.
This is why it's also necessary that we get the 5 megawatt net metering cap. Instead of, he's vetoed it, what, 3 or 4 times?
4.
Right. 4 now. And we'll eventually see smaller vehicles pulling out of those giant garage door bays, and we can kind of shrink the doors a little bit and capture the heat of those vehicles as they leave the bay.
Yep.
Little tiny fire trucks that hold 5,000 gallons of water.
As soon as we can figure out a way to shrink down a ladder truck, we'll do that. But it does seem like those trucks get bigger and bigger every year.
So you need a motion to authorize you to sign that contract, and I'll make that motion.
Any other discussion?
Second.
Any comments or concerns?
I do actually have one, back to the question of the size of the fire trucks. Smaller fire trucks are available. They are not significantly more expensive. In fact, they may not be any more expensive. Having smaller fire trucks also allows us to have infrastructure that is appropriately sized for the people who live here. I would like to see smaller fire trucks. Yep. I can say it again. It's part of my TED Talk.
It's good to have it in writing every time.
It's just a matter of making sure that it meets our needs. You know, where not everywhere in town has public water service, and we don't have the
Exactly.
hydrants. We do have to make sure that.
But we don't have to have every truck sized.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh, no. And, you know, I mean, we hold on onto our, I mean, I was being somewhat facetious when I said that. I mean, our largest trucks are the trucks that we hold on to the longest, like our ladder truck is not exactly a brand new truck. So we do try to keep those going as long as we possibly can.
And when they wear out, let's get smaller ones.
And we're okay with the hourly rates and this fee schedule? There's nothing approaching minimum wage here.
Oh, my God, I was going through that, and
There's one engineer,
the price you pay.
the Hoyle Tanner, that gets $1,159 an hour.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's not going to be our lead engineer on this.
That's
project.
right.
Oh, wow. I guess my daughter Lily's going to support me at my old age.
But that's an engineer number 2.
Yes.
I mean, why do 1 and 3 get 1/10 of that? Is that a typo?
It could be, I can double check that and make sure they got it right. But we did have this, we had a couple people review, and of course HGA is one of the companies that we work with most often. So, yeah, I'll see why that must be a typo. I'm pretty sure that is
I would probably do it for half that, wouldn't
159.
you?
Quarter.
I mean, just call it even $500 an hour.
And
Okay.
I will double check that. I'm pretty sure it's
I'm gonna do it for
159.
Okay.
Or 115, one or the other.
I mean, it did get over 1,000 degrees in Phoenix yesterday, I think. All right, motion and a second,
I actually have.
oh, yes.
I'm on the task force as well, and I just want to say, I've been on CIP a few rounds, and this is a catastrophic need that our community has, and I hope the select board, when it comes time to engage with the public about this, are really gonna help illustrate how long this project has been repeatedly kicked down the road and really go to bat for our fire department, because they work in basically untenable conditions that I find scary. Their exposure to toxic environment because of lack of facility is very high. And I just really hope the select board will unanimously support the task force as we go out into the community and keep the waters clear as we make sure that this project happens, because it's been pushed down the line for years and years and years at this point.
Yeah, my word.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. All right, with that, all those in favor? Aye. Aye. Yeah. Almost went name. No, yeah, thank you. That's a good plan. All right, next up, what we've been waiting for years, decades. And you have, Nicole, you put together some notes on the proposed affordable housing committee. And I share several of these. I had several of the same questions and wasn't sure how we were gonna bundle this properly to get this going. So how do we wanna have this discussion?
Sure, so just to make sure everyone in the room's up to speed, there was some email, there's been a lot of correspondence going back and forth, not just recently, but over several months, about the Affordable Housing Committee that's been meeting. And not to belabor some of the points, most recently it was brought back to our attention by Sharon Monahan that an Affordable Housing Committee had in fact been established at town meeting in 1989. And the question was, why does that Affordable Housing Committee no longer exist? And while I was an incredibly precocious 12-year-old, I really have no idea why, after 1989, the select board failed to reappoint additional members to the Affordable Housing Committee. And in my research, I really wasn't able to come up with much, aside from the fact that a report had been presented. It was included in the annual report. Interestingly, in 1988 as opposed to 1989, so I'm a little confused about the dating of that, but at any rate, the report is certainly there, and it highlighted a number of things that were, necessary in the community at that time, which, of course, are echoes of what's necessary for the community at this time. That there was a lack of affordable housing, that it was, it would be profitable for the town to explore all options to encourage, any options that were available to encourage, contractors, property owners, what have you, to develop their property, to include apartments, to include condominium units, et cetera, et cetera. Since that time, a fair number of units were built, and when I say since that time, I'm speaking specifically the period from 1990 through the end of the 90s, right around 2000. You had Longview Estates was built, Southfield was first put through the planning board, with what is now known as Pineview as being the affordable housing companion to that development. So that really allowed the planning board to consider different densities. And as you know, we are still working on building out Southfield. And then, of course, even today, we still have some proposals that have gone all the way through the planning board and just are sitting currently undeveloped for any number of reasons. So there's certainly quite a bit out there right now. So I had asked the select board to consider a number of questions, which you're referring to, when considering reforming this committee. The 1989 warrant article language, I don't think is necessarily applicable today because there's been a lot of changes to state law and the powers and duties that have been vested in various bodies or positions. For instance, the planning board, master plan steering committee, and the town planner, which has been created since that time. Position created since that time. So, you know, what would the select board want to do if you wanted to reutilize that warrant article language? You can make some changes, such as removing, and let me just put this up here so everyone can see what I'm referring to. The warrant article language was to see if the town, recognizing the decreasing supply of housing affordable to our families and neighbors as a problem requiring community action, will vote to establish an affordable housing committee with 5 members appointed by the selectmen for staggered 3-year terms to investigate and make recommendations on affordable housing, to encourage and if possible initiate the construction of such housing and to coordinate efforts to provide such housing or take other actions related thereto. So my recommendation is that selectmen remove, if they were to reuse that mission statement, to remove the, if possible, initiate construction of such housing and coordinate the efforts to provide such housing, since we now have a town planner's position who does that coordination on behalf of the town to make sure that, you know, everything's being done in line with the zoning, if not to direct them to the planning board if the zoning board is appropriate, to work, you know, in coordination with the code officer to make sure that they're meeting various code requirements.
Do we have the authority to modify that language?
Yes, you do. So I did check with John Radigan on this before he went on vacation, and he said that it's really up to the select board. The select board, back in 1989, had a mandate from town meeting. They chose to impanel the committee. They felt, he says, one can assume that since they didn't continue the work, they felt that the committee had completed their work. And so called it good and let it go. Very similar to another committee that was created at the same time, which I think was a committee on elderly needs in the community or something like that.
Right.
Was created at the exact same time.
Committee of the elderly.
Right. So again, you know, that committee was allowed to lapse after, you know, doing a report and perhaps some study work. So it's a little unclear because, again, had a hard time finding any minutes or anything like that. I'm really just going based on what I was able to find in reports.
I thought there was a process for decommissioning, you might say, these committees, but they just kind of fade away.
It does seem that way. Sometimes they have a very clear mission, a start and end. The first one that comes to mind is like Evans Flat Steering Committee. The town meeting created it. There was a thing that they were requesting of it. It provided that, and then that was it. They were done. So sometimes the warrant articles are written very clearly like that. Other times, like this one, they're not so clear.
And so it's our charge to come up with a mission, not necessarily the group that we're going
Well, I
to
guess
put together or will be put together.
I think the first question is, what do you want to recreate the committee? It was Attorney Radigan's opinion that you're not required to, especially since it's been over 30 years since the committee last did any action. So do you feel that there is a need? If you do feel that there is a need, do you want to reutilize this warrant article language, or do you want to see a different charter? Do you want to see a different mission? Are there, and as I went down through, do you want to define affordable housing within that mission? Because there's a lot of potential definitions of affordable housing. Is there a particular population that you're looking to target because housing for young families is different than housing for the elderly? You know, are there specific achievable, measurable goals for the committee to work towards or achieve? Would you want that committee to, in what ways would you want the committee to seek to meet their mission statement? So take, for instance, the Community Power Task Force. They're very specifically first coming back to the select board to say whether or not it makes sense to adopt a community power plan. That's their first goal, you know, so you've asked them to, you know, please do that first before you go ahead and do anything else. So are there specific goals that you would want them to work towards or achieve? Should They have a requirement, like I just said, to report out to the select board. Would that be built into the charter for the committee? Would they be advisory to the select board, gathering info, making recommendations to the board? Or are they given in some specifically outlined measure of authority to commit town resources to solicit consultants to apply for grants, et cetera? Which is, of course, something that you can always modify later.
Sure, and one of those resources could be what Senator Bradley was speaking about earlier.
Right.
The money there allocated.
Ben Frost and at the Department of, New Hampshire, New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, thank you. Yep. A few other things, are there specific questions that the select board would want the committee to research? What would who would the members of the committee be? Would they be residents only, residents and property owners, residents and business owners? Should there be a required member of the EDA, the planning board, the master plan steering committee? A selectman could be a member of the committee, or would a selectman only liaison to the committee? Would this committee have a deadline for producing reports and recommendations, or would they be perpetual? So these are many questions.
Are you saying there's some questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a historical question, sort of relates to what you were saying, with the decommissioning. If you go through the annual reports, I mean, supposedly there were 5 of them for staggered 3-year terms. What
Yeah.
evidence do we see?
I did
of
research
their-
that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was curious as well. It didn't last long.
Well, how long? I mean, what
Okay,
years
about
so?
3 years. About 3 years, and then it drops off, but there's no annual reports. You know, you go through the university archives to look at other towns' annual reports. But anyways, and we don't have ours in the archives after there's a gap between 1991 and 1996, so
I
that's
have
where.
all of those, and I looked through all of them as well.
Yeah,
and
so
there was nothing there.
it only existed, it seems, in 1988. It was first started in 1988, as she said, and it had a specific task to create low to moderate income housing. You know, that's what they said.
Well, that was their mission statement.
That was kind of their mission, but they were created for that. And then there was a warrant article, they got a warrant article to $20,000, and that passed for, I don't know, for low to moderate income housing, you know, to accomplish that. That was passed. It was in the budget in 1990, you know what I mean, as for that. And I have no idea what project it could possibly be. I don't know. So I'm sorry, but it did get everything got dropped after 1991, really.
Of course, '89 was right at the height of that recession, right? And right
Yeah.
now, we're not necessarily in a recession, we're in a real estate boom, kind of the opposite, where it's coming out of
There's certainly a lot of things that are very similar and a lot of things that are very different from that time, no question about it. I mean, the cost of land and the cost of buildings has skyrocketed significantly since 1989.
Well,
you know,
since 2 years ago.
Even since 2 years ago, absolutely. You know, absolutely, a lot has really changed. I mean, I think if you really wanted to know why they stopped doing their work, you could certainly ask Norma McKechnie or Heather Peterson, since they were both members of the committee, and they may recall. I honestly, after talking to John Radigan and doing some research, and again, addressing, you know, the differences between then and now, it's really neither here nor there why they stopped meeting after the early 90s. And the fact of the matter is that here we are now, our situation's quite a bit different. Our tools are not what they were then either. There was a lot of federal money at the time that could be put towards building low and moderate housing. And a lot of, for instance, when what's now Pine View, and I'm trying to remember, Prescott Hill was built, those apartments. They were called Prescott Hill at the time. They were built using some federal money that matched or reduced the provided benefit to the mortgaging. So it was really beneficial for the developer to do that. Southern New Hampshire Services, I think, had a part in that. There was a lot of public-private partnership that went into developing those apartments. Those programs don't really exist anymore, or they're substantially diminished. And
We do have the infrastructure bill moving its way through at the federal level, and there could be a fair amount of money that's become available for that, so.
But I think one of the challenges that we're going to see now, as opposed to 30 years ago, is the diminishment of the industry, the building industry. Back in the 80s and 90s, you had a lot of people, my ex-husband was, one of those people, and his family were the people that were building these things, and they were looking for work at that time. These companies were really scrambling. Developers were scrambling, property owners were scrambling. No one's scrambling right now. Nobody. A lot of those people have retired out of the industry, and there's no one backfilling them. So the cost, not just of materials, not just of land, but the cost of labor has skyrocketed. And with the amount of money that people are spending in cash to buy homes and condos right now, it's very hard to imagine, and this is me speaking personally, of course, it's very hard to imagine any developer wanting to leave that money on the table to build affordable housing. It's going to be incredibly challenging for whomever, if you choose to, empower a group of people to somehow encourage affordable housing. Given the limited tools available, it's going to be very difficult to find a way to bridge that and really make it work.
Well,
There's one way, state and federal funding to bridge the gap.
And we had, a year ago, we had a contractor in here that was interested in our rights up at Southfield Village.
Yes.
And they were gonna guarantee affordable apartment rentals. And we were pretty excited because this was an opportunity for many units. We're talking, how many were that?
The
30,
conversion
50
was,
units?
yeah, something like that. They
Right.
wanted to convert the approved condos to apartments. But we were limited because what we own is within a condo association over which we have no rights to vote, or in which we have no rights to vote.
And then the board there shut.
More or less, yeah. They
So-
put a stop to the conversation.
Now, that was before things kind of went crazy and everybody busy building.
Everyone's building up there now, yeah.
So, not sure if that might have. Sarah, and then
I think I would say, looking at this, and having been thinking about this since I read I do think it's important to understand some of the history, but I think it's important to not get bogged down in the historical facts. It is important to understand some of it. But, I'd love to chat with Norm and Heather and just understand the broad strokes. But I think that what I would like to see in your language, if you undertake this, is real definition about collaboration between, built into it, between master plan, zoning, planning. I'd like to see that collaboration, built into it. And also, I was on the housing task force, and you guys know I'm on master plan and planning board. We have a very torn town. We all know this. We have a reputation at this point amongst other towns for not being a nightmare town to come into and try to, everybody freaks out whenever anybody tries to build something. And additionally, Peterborough has exclusionary zoning, and that federal money, that sweet, sweet federal money, is not going to be available to us because we have exclusionary, single-family centered zoning. That's what we have, for better or for worse. It's not a fight, it's just a fact. And we need to do more restorative work in our community that the Housing Task Force was going to undertake, and we did not have one single restorative conversation, and you guys were there. Every time the conversation got heated, every time we were stopped from just going there and actually just talking about it and trying to find that common ground, which I think is possible to happen. It was a completely just thwarted experience for myself, and I know many others, even people who feel differently than I do about some of the issues. We were not allowed to really talk about it. And we did have some interesting people come in from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority, and I really appreciated some of the stuff that Nicole brought to the table and other members from the town. But the bottom line is we have some serious fault lines in our community about this stuff. And we have exclusionary zoning, and what can the select board do to try and confront that fact and show what the options are, even if it's not coming out the way I want it personally, that's fine. But we need to actually address the fact that when our town comes together and starts talking about neighborhood character or things like that, these are dog whistles for exclusionary zoning and for shutting out people who other people think just don't belong. And it's just, this is a historical fact in the country we live in. This is not my opinion. I'm not opining about things that are up for debate. This is just true. So I would beg you guys, if you undertake to write this, that you speak to young people in our community, even high school students, the ones who are not going to come back here when they get out of college because they feel like our community is exclusionary. I would talk to the young people who are here, who are coming here, who want to be here and aren't sure if they can stay. And I would urge you to talk to like everybody in fashion language that is builds in collaboration and some basic establishing facts about what we're facing and what the potential actions are we can take. I'll stop now.
Thank you. That sounds to me like the work the committee could do.
Right, but in the mission statement, you can build some of this in, is what I'm saying. I would like to see the select board demonstrate knowledge and an action plan in that mission statement. So when that committee gets off the ground, they can get off the ground running. And it's not a year of establishing mission. Because that is what is going to happen. And I'm happy to sit down with you guys. I'm sure there's other people. I'm sure Jonah here is happy to sit with you. I'm sure Sharon is. Like, we have to build it into the mission statement. Or else it's just gonna sit there and there's federal money coming out during this administration that is tied to inclusionary zoning. That is what the administration's language says. Inclusionary zoning, you get some money. We're not gonna get that money because we have exclusionary zoning. I am not saying we are an exclusionary town. This is a great town, this is a welcoming town. I live here, I choose to live here. I don't hate this town, but it is exclusionary zoning. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to get past a town meeting where it doesn't turn into another civil war. We need to have more inclusionary zoning. All that.
So is that,
Well,
Yeah.
I have a couple of things. Yes, Sarah is absolutely correct about the way the federal money is structured. It's quite clear that this administration, as did the Obama administration, believes that carrots are gonna work better than sticks. I personally am ready for a stick, but that's not my call. And so what they have done is they have tied the money to, and there are actual lists of goals that you can look at, and we're not hitting them. So until we decide that we are willing to have that conversation and make those changes in our code, that federal money is not coming to us. There is a little LIHTC money available, that's low-income housing tax credits. The problem with LIHTC money is that it generally only works for 40-unit garden apartments, which is not what we want. It's not what we want, it's not what the people who are moving here want, but that's the easiest thing to build with that money. Also, there are not that many people who are interested in running those projects. There are a couple over on the seacoast, but there's somebody in Walpole, I think, did one, but they're few and far between because they're, it's like the lead certification, they're complicated to run. So yeah, all of that. I don't know what the answer to this is. I guess my sense is that housing has become an issue that is very hard to address on an individual town basis for a whole lot of reasons. So suppose we fix our code. We actually don't have any incentive to fix our code because other people aren't going to, which is one of the reasons that I have sponsored and will continue to sponsor statewide preemptive zoning. And, it's got all of the issues that go with that, but I think that at this point in our history, it's really hard to do this on a town-by-town basis. So I mean, you can recreate the committee, but I'm not really sure what we can realistically expect that committee to produce. I mean, you know what housing costs are, you know what building costs are, you know what land costs are, you know the numbers. I'm sure Bill can get the number as fast as I can. I have to get $1 out of for every $100 that I spend creating a unit. I gotta get $1 back in rent every month or I will go broke. So do the math, man. The math is relentless.
Right.
I certainly have no expertise in this area of housing and all the issues involved in it. So I would be very loath to try to come up with a mission statement that would make sense for this town. My suggestion is, we've got concerned residents in town who are concerned about the housing issue and could bring forth that kind of research and interest to the select board.
I'm happy to give my TED Talk anytime you want to hear.
Yeah.
This is my concern though, is if the select board is not on board, like maybe you have a group of citizens who work on the mission, but the select board needs to ultimately be 100% on board with that mission statement when that committee launches. And I know you guys are up for re-election, but that is one of the problems. I mean, odds are Bill's gonna get re-elected, right? Odds are. This is something you're super passionate about. If you need to be on with this mission statement, it needs to be something you believe in. If it's not something you believe in, we're not gonna be able, that's one of the problems whenever these zoning conflicts come up. Everybody's like, wait, I don't know, wait, is that it? Is that it? I don't know what people are talking about. Is this true? Is this true? And it's like, I don't know if we can fix it. I'm not saying I have the answer. I see that come up every time. The select board is not armed and ready with facts and like why this would work for our community. And it's just not to say it's your fault. That's not what this is not about blame. I just think that if you're gonna have a statement crafted, it needs to come back to you guys a couple times before it launches.
Sure. And having gone through the housing task force and really trying to, I didn't see it as housing coming out of it. I saw it as trying to mend fences. People were so at each other, and I was discouraged by how it ended up going. And then when I saw Nicole's list of questions here, I had all these same questions. The first one being, define affordable. I mean, it means a different thing to every single person that's going to be involved with this. There has to be the goal set aside, never mind the word affordable, but the goal to get housing to people that need it. But I am discouraged, and I don't think I could. I've been racking my brain for years, but trying to think about what is the magic here. What is the silver bullet that's going to fix this? And there isn't one, and it's an immense thing for anybody to try and shoulder. So I don't know if it would be up to us to come up with the mission statement. But I hear what you're saying. Get something goal-oriented that's hit the ground running. Put the bickering aside. Figure it out whether it's doable or not.
Like, could the master plan offer a subcommittee to get this work going? And then come back to this, like, because I know we are way overdue for housing, we're way overdue for traffic, we're working on land use and vision, which are statutorily required right now. But could we have a subcommittee that has this work ready, and maybe Sharon could sort of spearhead that subcommittee, and then it could get to a point where we have the mission language, and then we can get to a point where we can have the committee up and running and have it be on like a 3 to 6 month timeline to get that mission statement together, something like that.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting
What?
option.
It's absolutely an option.
Okay.
And just as the Master Plan Steering Committee is working on the vision chapter and the approach that's being taken with that, I think it's a great approach. And if that same approach could go towards this,
Right.
really thinking about language and end goals that are, doable or not pie in the sky kind of generic. Sharon, and then
Okay, it's very simple how this came about. It was accidental, I found this. Your last meeting was July 6th, I couldn't follow it. There was something about changes in the code book, and I went, oh, what's the Peterborough code book? So it was kind of accidental. And believe it or not, my expectations were quite simple, like bringing it up. We have been meeting, the newspaper did an article, you met July 6th, the newspaper did an article, ledger transcript, saying that affordable housing committees reboot in Peterborough, okay? So then, all of a sudden, our committee, which was not recognized, but had been meeting and trying to do things, all of a sudden, people were inquiring because of the newspaper article, which is what happened when we brought up Evans Flat. All of a sudden, there's newspapers reporters, you know what I mean? And
One right now, just.
yeah, okay, and then we have administration saying, oh, you don't exist. So we were very frustrated.
I wasn't saying you didn't exist. I was saying
Officially, we did.
weren't official
We
town
weren't
committee.
official. I understand that. It wasn't personal, Nicole.
It
But
was a subcommittee of the EDA, that's why.
Yeah,
No,
and then there was
It
this-
never actually was authorized as a subcommittee.
Oh, it wasn't.
No.
because nobody appointed, the select board didn't appoint us, so.
The EDA never even
Never
voted
brought
on
to
it.
the
They
board.
just simply started on that
Right.
topic and.
But my point is, my expectations at this point, they're not, I appreciate that other people have a greater vision, is that I just want us to be recognized as existing, okay? And then, so that it does come under right to know law, so our meetings are posted and open to the public, you know, that
Right, so
it's
with-
on the calendar.
With that recognition.
And there's
then
minutes.
You should have a charge, and you should have some goals, and you should have guidelines to what you're doing.
Right.
It seems like it's been, trying.
Yeah. I don't think anybody was trying to take away from all the incredibly hard work that you did about it. I mean, I was pretty involved in it myself,
Yeah,
all along. And it was certainly not supposed to be like, "Bah, you're not even in its committee."
oh, I'm not
None
trying
of
to
that.
put
Everybody
blame, I'm
completely
just saying,
appreciated the work
yeah,
and want it to continue,
right.
but it has to be a legitimate that reports.
Exactly.
And that's what we're here to talk about. And I
Yeah.
don't think anybody has a problem.
And that's all my expectation. I'm just saying, I asked for it to be on the
Well,
agenda
I mean, you called it to our attention, and here we are, so
Okay,
there you go.
yeah.
You're not, I don't know why you should single me out for running for
But
reelection,
you're
although
up
I am
next.
the next
You're
one.
up next, that's the only reason why.
Yeah, but I hope that anybody doesn't think that this job is so glamorous and high-paying that I'm doing things that are actually bad for the town or not good for the town, just so that I can get reelected by the same people again. That's,
Nobody thinks that.
okay, well, it was sort of suggested that I may not want to be on board for this because if somebody might not vote for me again.
Not at all, that's not what was being
I
suggested.
could care less if I'm doing what's right for the town, somebody doesn't like it and doesn't vote for me, then I didn't want their vote anyways. So,
And I thought that I just chose, like she said, I think her questions are excellent. The mission statement, this was from 1989. And I do know that we actually did, when we thought we were an official subcommittee of the EDA, we did have a mission statement, and we do have a mission statement, and it had to do with being, actually, we felt the demand was for rental properties, which you brought up, and the focus was going to be solely, you know what I mean, on how to increase rental properties in town. And that is still critical today. So we did, I just think it begins with the select board recognizing it, and I wanted to put the ball in the select board's court. You still have the right to, since the problem was people were never appointed before, to begin appointing people or recognizing it. I don't know. I don't have high expectations at this point, I think the committee itself would give you a mission, probably the mission statement we had before, and see if you approve of that mission statement. I mean, that would be the first step.
Well, certainly, we'd like to see it.
Okay.
I appreciate the structure of that, the 5 members, 3-year terms, so there's a commitment,
Right.
right?
That's fairly standard.
Yeah.
So is it an arm of the EDA?
Right, that's.
No.
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 Okay, so
No.
it needs to have a home, is it its own thing?
Exactly.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's the
I mean,
question.
my assumption, and I wasn't able to find any evidence of this, but a number of committees that popped up around that time were absorbed into the Master Plan Steering Committee when it was transformed from the Long Range Planning Committee
It
into the
was
Master
called
Plan
that.
Steering Committee. So I think, and again, no evidence to this fact, but I think that what may have happened is that this committee was absorbed into the Master Plan Steering Committee. It became the housing chapter of
Okay.
the master plan. Again, no proof of that. That's just my assumption based on the timing of it all. So I guess that's the question for the board. Do you want to create a new committee? Do you want to solicit information from the public, about what should or could be part of that committee? Whether it be members or goals or mission statements or what have you? Or would you like to utilize the Master Plan Steering Committee process that's already in place? I don't think there's a question that this has to be answered tonight because we've already been here for 3 hours now altogether, so I think you guys are probably all
What's another
burnt
couple
out.
hours?
But
Yeah.
it's something that you could, anyone could email selectboard@peterborough.nh.gov, their thoughts and opinions on it. You can take some time to think about it before coming back.
I would love to offer that regardless of the outcome, I would love to offer space for you guys if you want to talk more about it in our master plan meeting in August. I believe we're meeting on the 16th at 6:30 PM instead of 4:30, so it's a more friendly time this month. So I don't know if it's something where you could come and we could talk about it more.
Well, I'm going to invite Master Plan. We are scheduled, and it is on the town calendar, August 11th, Wednesday morning at 8 a.m.
And what's it's called? It's
The Affordable Housing Committee.
Of the EDA?
No,
Just.
So will minutes be taken?
yes, we take minutes. We just
Will
have
the
not,
town publish them?
no one's been appointed.
So we
Or
haven't
minutes
published
published.
them yet. I mean, we've received one set of minutes. We don't have historical records of any minutes prior to that. But, I guess, Sharon, the other thing that you brought up is that you're not, you feel like this is bigger and maybe more structured than you had imagined the discussion would be tonight. There is still nothing to prevent a citizens group from meeting. We do have a community calendar in addition to the town's master calendar. There's a community events calendar that you could absolutely post to on the town's website. There's no reason why you can't do that and, broadcast your meetings, publicly that way. So whether or not you or the other members of the committee choose to become a part of whatever the selectmen ultimately decide the master plan steering committee moves forward with, that's still an option available to you, as a citizens group, as we've, discussed via email before.
And we'd love to have you at the meeting.
My concern is the Master Plan Steering Committee has to deal with all of housing, whereas this group was focused on affordable rental properties. I just,
Absolutely no reason why the master plan steering committee can't write, a separate section.
this is what we thought was our distinction, you know what I mean? And as well, the Housing Task Force was not, we were told, I went to those things, and when affordable housing came up, it was brought to us, oh no, we're not here for that, which they weren't, okay, I'm not, but we're not here for that. If you want to talk about affordable housing, get on the Affordable Housing Committee, which was us, so some people did,
Sure.
That's all.
I completely understand. I mean, it's not a you start and you stop sort of a discussion.
Yeah.
Where the master plan steering committee is taking different sections of the master plan in turn, so they're not always discussing affordable housing.
No, but we need
But,
it ongoing.
but I would, yeah, and I also want to just make sure it's mentioned, because for the 6 people watching who aren't in this room and don't pay a lot of attention to planning and zoning, it's really important to state that the master plan is what the planning board refers to when they're developing the zoning that
It's
goes on.
important. I agree, there
That's what
should
I
be
want to
liaison, we need to.
But we
yeah.
need to do more than liaison, we need to build, like, I'm not trying to push you
Yeah, I
from
mean-
having your citizens meeting, but we need to find the work you're doing, this time you're putting in, a home. It doesn't have to be master plan, it could be EDA.
Well, my
We need to have a
recommendation was
home.
through building and planning, since Danica oversees, or whatever,
And
she's
master-
the
which would be
administrator.
master plan.
Master
The
plan,
master
steering
plan's the
committee,
natural
planning board,
home.
that's why,
Yeah.
in my request, that be established, you know,
Well,
so
and
there's a
Dana's at
link.
all our meetings.
Yeah, and she has been attending our meetings as well. I'm just saying Danica has attended our meetings as well, so.
Great.
Ivy.
Ivy.
Yes, so the whole question of the master plan and what the master plan does, we have to have the vision chapter and the land use chapter in order to use what the state refers to as innovative land use controls. Those are the controls that delivered the cottages at Vine Street. Those are the controls that we used when we wrote TND2, which we sadly no longer have, which delivered 18 units of housing on Church Street. If we don't have in the master plan direction that says the town of Peterborough wants X, we can't write code and offer it to the town for a town meeting vote without that in the master plan. So that's really crucial. That's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing I wanted to say is, I think that we get bogged down in the definition of big A affordable and little a affordable and rental versus housing. Housing is one of the few places where the market economy actually works. It's not working very well right this minute, but long-term, over time, more production of housing reduces costs. We don't have Saudi princes buying apartments and not living in them in Peterborough. That is not our problem. We do have people moving here from other places. And one of the reasons that they are displacing people here is because we have not built enough housing over the last 75 years. We have artificially constrained the production of housing. And until we decide that we can live with a little more density in the parts of town that have water and sewer, we are going to continue to do that.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty delicate balancing act, isn't it? Because 10, 12 years ago, there was all kinds of empty houses around.
Right, but
And they were selling
but
for
here's the
nothing.
thing, Bill, we are 20,000 units short in New Hampshire alone.
I agree with you.
Across the United States, we are something like 4 million units short. And the reason that we're 4 million units short is because as a country, we have made land use decisions that depress the production of housing. There's also been economic things that have made it, and people got old and got out of the business because, it was 1989 and everything looked like shit. There are all kinds of things contributing to that, but the fact is that we have not built enough houses. And, and that by houses, I mean dwelling units. And until we get over ourselves and agree that we want more housing, we're not going to get more housing. And too many people who talk about housing come to the planning board and object to proposals for construction of housing because it's not perfect. None of it is perfect. It's never perfect. But if we object to every unit that is proposed, we aren't ever going to get anything. We're not going to get perfect. We're not going to get imperfect. We're not going to get nothing.
I would recommend that it's premature for us to reestablish the Affordable Housing Committee simply because, the mission statement in and of itself is outdated. I would recommend that we have a subcommittee of the master plan steering to address the housing issues, specifically to come up with a plan to reestablish a housing committee in the long run, and to define the vision, define the parameters to which they're going to address the issue, and bring that before the select board. You're gonna do the homework. I'm not, like I said, I'm not an expert in this, and I would be loath to even begin to write a mission statement for this thing.
I feel,
Well, the real thing here is that we, the three of us, work for the town. We don't just say, we're stroking the pen, here's what you do, and this is how we're doing it. We need people to tell us what we want, what everybody wants to see. And obviously, we can't just say, Ivy, well, how would you like to see it happen, and then make that happen? Or Sharon, how would you like to see that happen? Even though you're pretty damn close in a lot of places, you can't swipe a pen and take the argument out of it. You know? So it really does need to have a home. I think we all agree on that. It really does need to, we see, Kate. It really does need to have a home, but we really need to make it something that's not just gonna fizzle out or not gonna cause more fights. And we need to make sure that what we're putting together is the most effective possible way to do it. Rather than all the pointless busy work and, the task force, the community task force on housing had a lot of good things, a lot of good goals. Didn't work out. It was a lot of, from what I got, the biggest issue everybody had was it was like, we're not talking about housing, we're not actually doing something about it.
Right.
We're spending a year trying to learn how to play in the sandbox together, and that was kind of where the frustration was, whether or not that was true. But right now, we need to figure out what's the most effective way, and we can't decide that, I don't think, right this minute. But what is the most effective way? Is it under the master plan steering committee? Probably, because that's what's supposed to be driving it. I mean, that's what we've been sort of talking around in circles the whole time, and Bill just recommended it, and we've been talking about it for an hour, the master plan.
So let's start
and that's what I
there.
wanted to say.
Yes, Kate.
I wanted to drive me crazy, like you want to create a whole new little bureaucracy over here when you've got an entity that you didn't have before, that you have now that's charged with doing it. And that was one of the things that drove me crazy about the task force, is it sucked up a year of time or more that should have been.
Got cut off by
Well,
COVID
but even
anyways.
before that, it was like master plan process, which is statutorily mandated, land use, housing, the whole bit. We were 2 or so years behind on that already. And like, let's not do another little
Bog down,
time
this,
suck,
that,
and
So-
people suck.
Come
And
up with
so-
an actual.
So let me just
What
finish
action
my
do we need to
sentence.
take in order to
Let
make
Kate
that happen?
finish. Come on, Kate's still talking.
I was still
I
talking.
heard,
I was
sorry.
just saying, first of all, I was totally agreeing with you, but it's like, use what you've already got, do not start a whole, I'm sorry, it isn't a whole other committee. I know,
It
I know, you've
sets
been
a
doing it.
specific goal of
It,
affordable housing.
I know, and
It's
it
not-
needs to be instead of being over here, it needs to be feeding in to master plan, Danica's work, and then, I'm just seeing it as a pure decision tree and a structural issue. So, again, this is a metaphor, we've spun out an hour of thinking
You're
we
right.
could have people writing this and this and this. It's like, stop it, you've got
Right.
people right over here working on it, they've been working on it, just get them into the master plan process, which has a timeline, which has a mandated outcome, get it done that way.
Which gives the planning board the tools to make their work
Yeah,
done,
and
which
so
is,
the select board
everybody's right, so we
Yeah.
just stop
Okay,
talking in
that's all.
circles about it, and let's
What actions
pretend like we're all
master
coming
plan?
up with new ideas and actually
what
do it.
Sharon
I'm
needs
gonna
to
hold
hear,
off. I'm
though,
gonna
is
hold
that
off
it's
on
not
any
gonna
more.
be folded into the housing. We can have a subcommittee that is affordable housing. It doesn't need to be folded into the housing committee. And I think that's a sticking point for you. And it's important that you know that we can have an affordable housing committee that is not a housing committee.
Right, we have to.
That's a great
Inside
point.
master
Okay,
plan.
so with that, and Bill's recommendation, we all agree, the master plan steering committee is where it
It's
should
the
lie.
home.
Yeah, so let's just do that.
What actions do we need to take in order to make that
let's-
happen?
Let's set that tonight.
I think that you've made it, it's in, you've all agreed to it, it'll be reflected in the minutes. The master plan steering committee will do their work, they'll appoint the subcommittee as it sees fit, and the recommendations for the members will be referred back up to the select board for your official blessing.
Right, and we'll see, you'll come up with how they're gonna structure the mission and all that. Right. And that's where.
That's all gonna be the work of the committee.
Well, and we'll be
Yep.
meeting on the 16th,
Yep.
and you'll be there.
Okay,
Oh,
but
one
and the
of the-
Affordable Housing Committee is meeting on August 11th, I'm just saying.
No, I get that, but
Yeah.
I can't make that.
But
work, so
I
can't
need
meeting.
to relay that information.
I'm not here on the 11th either, so.
Yeah.
One of the things that we need to do as well is, as a town, is to advertise for membership.
Yeah.
So that's one of the important steps involved.
Right, because you could have members, and so that if this is a subcommittee of the Master Plan Steering Committee?
Yeah.
So it could be another
Well,
way to
Not
separate-
everyone wants to be
All-
appointed, you know
all
what I
that
mean,
you
like a
want. I don't
3-year
think
term.
All the people,
Just so you know.
none of the people, whichever.
Right now,
Whoever wants to be a part of it will be a part of it.
So that we need to draft a press release right now that's,
myself,
within the next couple days
and
that
then
says,
other people.
yeah,
who
maybe
are very
Megan, you can help us with this.
active, You know,
But we need a press release that says what we're
they
establishing
don't meet every meeting.
and that we need people to do
It's,
it, and to join,
Joanne's
right?
car.
And this is what we've decided,
Carol
is that
Nelson.
the direction that we're going, and so that it's in the
Now
paper,
Stephanie Hurley
we can share it on
has been
Facebook
going.
and,
And she's on.
what were you saying
Yeah, and
earlier,
she's on
the Twitter
Twitter.
sphere or something?
Twitterverse.
Yeah.
The Twitterverse, right?
Actually, Carol
Twitter's
Hurley
verse.
I have
came to
seven
our last
followers
meeting,
on
I know.
Yeah.
We can
I
just
know we're
signal it,
trying,
not
and
virtue
Danica
signal
was
it.
there, yeah.
I will
And get it out there that
We're
it's something
trying
that's
to
happening, and we
be-
could like start.
Well, that's what
And
we're trying to
everybody,
do.
we definitely need more apartments, we need more housing, 'cause I don't think anybody disagrees with that.
I think that you'll find, as you've seen recently, that the Master Plan Steering Committee and Danica's office have done a great job with publicizing the work that
Yeah, they have.
they're doing. We'll do it again.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
But you don't have to.
All right.
You guys having a subcommittee meeting over
They're
there?
having.
Yeah, we're doing a subcommittee.
Okay,
Hey,
we're gonna,
sorry.
I'm gonna check the agenda here, see if we have anything else.
I'm sure.
Unless you've got other
Any
business.
other business?
We're going on 3.5
All
hours.
right.
3.5 hours.
Public service.
This was a great meeting, I appreciate it.
Wasn't it kind of-
Yeah.
Yep.
Motion to adjourn?
I'm so glad that I'm
So moved.
over here.
Was there other business? I think we addressed the other business. That was
We
key.
covered-
You wanted Zoe on the board, yeah, so that's
Right.
taken care of.
Yeah.
And the HKT. Great. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Right, good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
We got what this happens.
You did?